Hello, my name is Brett Sandusky, and I am the founder and principal of a company called B Digital Media Labs. My background in publishing started many years ago when I was actually working for a number of different companies. I started actually in France working for a magazine publisher, and when I moved back to the States, I continued working in publishing, and at the time I was involved in a lot of digital marketing and kind of forging the path with what publishers were doing online, which was a new path for many companies, but particularly publishers. And after doing that for a number of years, I actually moved into being involved in a product development role and was in charge of, and I was leading innovation and new product incubation for Kaplan, which is where I was working at the time. And at that point, ebooks had just started being used. Many people were still figuring it out. We were in the midst of almost a whirlwind of activity where people were working with new contracts that they had never seen before and understanding what the whole world of ebook distribution was going to be like. And it was a very exciting moment, and it was then that we started experimenting pretty heavily with a number of different technologies that could be used to deliver content, but that were not typically commonplace within kind of the publishing world. So we worked in a lot of web technologies. We worked with a lot of different things that we were trying to push the limits of what ebooks could do, and kind of move in that direction. So after that, I went to Macmillan, where I was involved on a product perspective, working with an educational product that they had acquired before my tenure there, and was running it was an adaptive learning platform, and we were constantly working on kind of the product and moving it forward from there. And after that, I went out on my own, and I've been a consultant working in product development since then. And my main kind of area of expertise is in product development and user experience, and really digging into the ins and outs of building digital products, particularly in the area of publishing and media, where so much of what happens there has to do with communication and has to do with objectives and reaching those objectives through the content that's produced. And so it's not as simple sometimes as making things that can simply be easy and fun to use, but that they actually have to do something as well for the user. And that's my background. I don't think that, from my perspective, and the way that I approach projects, is that user experience doesn't is not involved in making judgment calls, and user experience as a practice is not supposed to say this is good, this is bad. It should absolutely do this one thing or not do this other thing. The role of user experience is to actually approach product development from a very thoughtful place and understand what the user actually has to go through, what their experience is of using a product, what they're forced to do, what things they can do, and it's actually about determining the outcomes and the implications of all of those outcomes for all of those things. So instead of saying, from a UX perspective, it's good or bad that a reading system has or does not have the ability to change font size, what UX would say is, if this product were built without the ability to change font size, how would that affect the user's experience of using this product? And if it were a negative effect, then you would have to weigh that option and say, you either make a decision that we accept that this would have a negative impact on the product as a whole, but we've decided not to do that for X and Y reason, or the negative impact does not does outweigh the positive of not doing it. So we're going to actually implement this feature, and that's really what it's about. It's about analytical thought and really understanding what features should be and not be included. But it's always part of a whole. You have to look at things from a holistic standpoint and say, what is the experience of using this overall, not just this one thing in a vacuum, but what is the experience of using this overall completely. So I think DRM is a really interesting question and how that affects the reading system. For a long time, and I'm not the only one, but for a long time now, I've been a vocal opponent to DRM, and I really believe that the only person in the entire equation that is affected in a negative way by DRM is the consumer, the person who actually buys the product, who pays money for it, and it locks us into, understandably, from a retail perspective and from a hardware producer and manufacturer perspective, it locks us into certain reading systems. It doesn't allow us to share easily, and there are a lot of big major problems, I think, that have to do with ownership over content and how we approach that, based that DRM, doesn't allow us to do that a paper book, a printed book would allow us to do. The argument has always been that the retailers have said that the publishers want it, and the publishers have always said that the retailers want it, and it's a kind of circular back and forth about who actually is forcing the other side to implement it, where really both sides are pretty well benefit essentially from this thing. The person who doesn't benefit is the consumer. And that to me is the biggest problem, because from a UX perspective, the consumer's always at the center, always at the forefront, and you're always making decisions based on the consumer's experience. So to say that we're going to do these things to the detriment essentially of the consumer experience is problematic. When we look at things like DRM, even without looking at specific sales data or behavioral data or these things, it's very clear that when you look at the whole ecosystem, so part of the role of user experience is to also look at things from a qualitative standpoint and understand what people go through and be empathetic to what users and consumers are forced to do to be our customers. And when you look at that, it's just perfectly clear that we're doing all of our customers a disservice by locking them into only certain retailers and only certain channels, and that's easy to look at. I mean, there are certain behaviors that just don't exist, like sharing. Sharing, while it may exist on the Kindle, is so, probably, I would bet, one of the least used features. And it's just people are not sharing ebooks. That's just it's just something that doesn't happen. Whereas people share print books constantly. People are giving books to their friends. People are gifting things to their friends. All of this stuff, you can't do that with an ebook. So that one, I would say, actually a very important piece of communication around book content is the peer-to-peer, one person giving it to the next, thing about content, and that doesn't exist with ebooks. And instead, we're in a much more kind of siloed world where you have your library and it's your own personal library, and in the real world, someone can walk into your home and say, "Oh, I see this book on your shelf. That's really interesting. I've been meaning to read it." And you can say, "Well, take it. I'm happy to lend it to you, and you can read that." And in the ebook world, you can't do that. You don't see someone else's library. You don't see what they're reading, and you don't have that kind of shared experience. Well, I would actually suggest a couple of things. There are a number of books that there is a company called 37 Signals, which created Basecamp, the software that is a collaborative product development software that is available online. They also created some other a couple other things that go together, and also one of their partners is um, the the is DHH, who basically is the founder or the guy who created Ruby on Rails. They have a number of books that they created and sell as ebooks that are really interesting in terms of product development and understanding agile process and understanding how to approach iteratively, how to approach product development in an iterative manner. And I definitely think that anything that they've created is worth reading. Um, I would also really highly recommend reading anything about like Backbone.js or AngularJS or other front end um, web development uh, technologies. And I'm actually reading a lot about this now, and it's highly informative in terms of the way that people are thinking about this split that I'm talking about between data and product. And the reason that I mentioned Backbone and Angular is that they are both specifically front end technologies that are made to divorce or create this decoupling between the back end data and the front end, which is the product. So yeah, to finish really quickly with that. So if you read it for what it is, you can start to see, the theory behind what people are talking about in terms of like where people are coming from in terms of how they approach technology. Those are the types of things that I'm reading a lot right now because they're really informative about thought around technology and development, which I think helps us to embrace the next upcoming era of what we're doing as publishers. Sure. I think that in terms of a message for Japanese readers, I would say that it would be great for all of us to be able to collaborate on a higher level, because I think that some of the things that are happening in the reading space in Asia and specifically and not really happening here. There's been a lot of talk about things going on mobile phones and a lot of advances in different ways. And I think that were we to collaborate and were we to find ways to collaborate, we would have a much better time figuring out the technology that we as publishers need to embrace and to use in different ways. And I think that that's something I would love to be involved in, and hope that other people would love to be involved in as well.